The gift of the chorus was harmony. It was a wave of purest empathy, a psychic signal broadcast from the galactic core by the enigmatic and long-ascended race known only as the Harmonists. It swept through star systems like a gentle tide, offering a singular, beautiful cure to the pains of sentient existence. It found species grappling with their own destructive natures, war, tribalism, greed, and fear, and it offered them release. It was a communion of a trillion minds, a benevolent field that dampened the jagged, painful edges of consciousness. When the chorus first touched the Cathel, their brutal, millennia-long civil war ended in a single solar cycle. Warriors dropped their plasma blades, their carapaced faces streaming with tears of sudden, profound understanding. They saw the other not as an enemy, in silo, but as a part of the greater whole. Their rage, their fear, their ancestral hatreds did not just fade. They were unknotted, dissolved by a wave of absolute, unconditional peace. The Cathel laid down their arms and began, as one, to build monuments to their new, shared serenity. This was the gift. The chorus did not demand, it only offered. It was a telepathic suppression of the amygdala, a galactic-scale therapy session that excised the very concept of aggression, anxiety, and paranoia. The price for this peace was negligible, or so the few who could still articulate the cost claimed. The price was motivation, ambition, the chaotic, painful, necessary spark of self-preservation. On the world of Cygnus Prime, the last of the Elvisk composed their final symphony. The Elvisk had been a species of passionate, fiery, and deeply anxious artists. Their operas were legendary, fueled by despair and unrequited longing. After the chorus healed them, the anxiety vanished. The longing ceased. The art stopped. A generation later, their birth rates fell to zero. There was no panic, no sorrow. They simply stopped. They had no compelling primal urge to continue. There was no fear of death, no ambition for legacy, no desperate love that demanded propagation. Their final symphony was a single perfect monotonous note, held for 3 decades before the last Levisk painter set down his brush and quietly expired of contentment. The galaxy called this ascension. It was a quiet, dignified end. The few species who had not yet been touched by the wave were categorized by the chorus not as enemies, but as patients. The envoys of the chorus, typically serene members of the Silthani, would arrive in their beautiful ovoid biological ships, broadcasting the wave. They were not conquerors, they were healers. They came to offer the galaxy's greatest and final cure. Now their fleet of shimmering, pearlescent vessels drifted at the edge of a new, unexplored sector. This sector was chaotic, loud, and thrummed with a psychic noise that the envoys found deeply unsettling. It was a discordant shriek of fear, rage, ambition, and uncontrolled joy, all tangled together. It was the signal of a species that had just breached its own gravity well and was clawing its way into the void with crude, violent chemical explosions. The envoys considered the inhabitants of the small, muddy Deathworld planet in the Sol system. They readied the signal. It was time to offer the gift to the ones who called themselves humanity. It was time to finally heal the cacophony. On the bridge of the United Nations star vessel Sagan, Captain Eva Rostova pinched the bridge of her nose, fighting a tension headache that had been her constant companion for 3 weeks. The Sagan was a prototype, a clunky, over-engineered explorer vessel that ran on a barely understood warp drive and smelled faintly of ozone and recycled coffee. They were the first human ship to push this far out, past the charted relays, and into what the galaxy's great stillness seemed to consider its backyard, and the stillness was, to Eva, deeply unnerving. "Report," she said, her voice a low rasp. "Still nothing," replied Communications Officer Kenji Tanaka, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on his console. "I mean plenty of signals, Captain, but they are placid. It is like listening to a planet-wide meditation app. No traffic control chatter, no commercial bark, no military posturing. Just welcome signals, harmonized, in about 4,000 different languages. It is creepy, Doctor. Thorne, your assessment? Rostova asked, turning to the man standing by the main viewport. Dr. Eris Thorne was the mission's xenopsychologist, a man whose baseline state was a kind of vibrating, high-functioning anxiety. He was thin, with eyes that never seemed to rest, and he was, in Eva's opinion, the most paranoid man she had ever met. This was precisely why he was the best at his job. My assessment, Eris said, not turning from the viewport, is that this great stillness is a lie, or rather a symptom. We are seeing advanced civilizations, FTL-capable across thousands of systems. Where is the conflict? Where is the resource competition? Where is the chaos? Sentient life is not this neat. This is the sociological equivalent of a jungle where all the predators have decided to go vegan, and the prey have decided to just lie down and be eaten. It is wrong. It is a too-good-to-be-true scenario, and in my experience, those are always traps. So you are saying the galaxy is a cult, Rostova said, finally taking a sip of the bitter, lukewarm coffee. I am saying the galaxy is in a cult, Eris corrected. A big, happy, terrifyingly functional one. My recommendation remains the same. We do not broadcast our full cultural package. We do not respond to hails. We stay at the edge of this sector, we observe, and we keep our paranoia shield, as you so mockingly call it, Kenji, on full blast. Kenji shrugged. I just think you are projecting, Doc. Maybe they are just better than us. Maybe they figured it out. Maybe fear and anger are the appendix of the sentient mind, a leftover we just do not need anymore. Fear keeps you alive, Eris muttered. Anxiety makes you run the diagnostics a third time. Paranoia makes you check the dark corners before you bed down for the night. Our entire evolutionary history is a testament to the survival benefits of negative emotions. We are the descendants of the ones who saw a shadow in the grass and ran, not the ones who stopped to analyze it. You take that away, you are not better, you are food. Rostova held up a hand. Enough. We have our orders. Observe. Make limited contact if deemed safe. We are 3 days from the designated first contact waypoint with the envoys of... what do they call it? The chorus, Kenji supplied, his screen flashing. Well, speak of the devil. Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy surge, a fleet of bioships, I think. They are dropping out of warp, right on top of us. Active alert. Rostova snapped, her voice cutting through the tension. Raise shields. Get me a visual. The main screen flickered. The starfield replaced by a cluster of 5 ships. They were beautiful, like colossal opalescent nautilus shells drifting in the black. They were impossibly graceful, and they made no hostile moves. They simply were. They are hailing us, Kenji said, his voice suddenly tight. Audio only. No, wait, it is not audio, it is everywhere, Kenji whispered, his hands falling from his console. They are broadcasting peace, it is so peaceful, his eyes unfocused, a look of placid contentment smoothing his normally worried features. Kenji, Rostova shouted. Then, the wave hit the bridge. It was not a sound, it was a presence. It was a warm, heavy blanket of absolute calm, a psychic solvent, designed to dissolve all fear. It felt like sinking into a hot bath. It felt like giving up. It felt wonderful. For a second, Rostova's mind went blissfully blank. Her hand, which had been reaching for the alert panel, relaxed. The tension in her shoulders evaporated. The Sagan, Earth, it all seemed so far away, so unimportant. All that mattered was this harmony. Then, something deep in the core of her brain, a primal billion-year-old lizard construct screamed. This was not peace. This was a predator's lullaby. This was the calm a boa constrictor feels as it tightens its coils. This was the silence of the prey that has given up the fight. Her training, her stress, her lifelong baseline of anxiety, her paranoia shield, did not just block the signal. It met it. It identified the peace as a threat, and her body reacted accordingly. No, she roared, slamming her fist onto the console. The pain, sharp and grounding, shattered the illusion. Adrenaline, hot and bitter, flooded her system. The peace wave felt it, recoiled, and then pushed harder. It was a psychic shove, an unspoken command that flooded her mind. Be calm. You are sick. We will heal you. Give up your fear. Get it out of my head, she yelled, stumbling back. She looked at Eris. He was on his knees, hands clamped over his ears as if he could block it out. But he was not calm. He was vibrating, his face pale, sweat pouring down his temples. It is a lobotomy, he hissed, his eyes wide with a focused, clinical terror. It is trying to cut. It is trying to find the fear center and excise it. It is not a suggestion, Ava. It is surgery. Across the bridge, the other human crew members were fighting. Some, like Kenji, were slumped, a beatific, empty smile on their faces. Others were thrashing, yelling, or weeping, their minds interpreting. The psychic invasion is a physical assault. Their Deathworld brains, hardwired to fight or flee at the slightest hint of a predator, were rejecting the gift with every ounce of their being. The ship's automated systems, sensing the catastrophic spike in crew vitals, began to blare. A calm, synthetic voice announced, "Warning. Unknown psychic phenomena detected. All human crew members registering acute adrenaline surge. Threat response protocol engaged." The peace wave faltered, confused. It had never been fought before. It had met resistance, but the resistance was always fear, which the wave was designed to soothe. It had never met a species whose fear was its primary weapon against the wave. It had never met a species that, when told to be calm, responded with a biological surge of pure, unadulterated, defiant rage. The bridge of the Sagan was a microcosm of a species' defiance. It was chaos. Officers were shouting, some clawing at their temples, others running security diagnostics, their hands flying over consoles in a panic-fueled, highly efficient frenzy. The ship's internal sirens wailed, a shrill counterpoint to the deep, oppressive psychic demand for calm. "Ava!" Eris Thorne shouted, pulling himself up on a console. His face was ashen, but his eyes were alive with a terrifying, brilliant clarity. It is not just a broadcast, it is a network it is trying to assimilate. It sees our panic as a disease. Rostova, her heart hammering against her ribs, shoved her way back to the command chair. The placid, cured face of Kenji Tanaka lolled toward her. His eyes were open, but empty. He looked peaceful. He looked extinct. "No," Rostova growled, the word a physical thing. The adrenaline was so potent it tasted like copper. This was the fight part of fight or flight. "Engineering report," the comm crackled. "We are fighting it, Captain," a voice screamed over the siren. "It is in the systems. No, wait. It is just in our heads. It is making us want to shut down the core." There was a grunt, a wet thud, and a new voice. "Chief Engineer is down," he went placid. "This is Sub-Engineer Haska. What the hell is going on?" "Haska, listen to me," Rostova barked. "Focus on my voice. Get angry. Get scared. That core is your baby. They are trying to hurt your baby. Do you understand me? Use it." There was a moment of silence, then a raw, terrified but furious roar from the comm. "Yes, Captain, nobody touches my core. I am rerouting. I am going to overload the secondary plasma conduits. If it wants a surge, I will give it one." "Dr. Thorne," Rostova pivoted, "you are the psychologist. Why are we still standing while Kenji is just gone?" "Baseline," Eris shouted, tapping frantically at a diagnostic screen. "It is our Deathworld psychology. The chorus is a cure for anxiety, fear, and aggression. But for us, those are our core functions. Our entire operating system is built on a baseline of something is trying to kill me. It is the paranoia that made us build walls, the anxiety that made us store food, the aggression that made us hunt the hunter." He pointed at the screen, which now showed the brain scans of the crew. Kenji's brain was a wash of cool, placid blue. He was in a state of perfect, blissful harmony. The rest of the bridge crew's brains were lit up in stark, violent reds and yellows. "The chorus is a predator that hunts by calming its prey," Eris said, his voice dropping in horrified awe. "It is the ultimate trust me from the universe. But we are hardwired not to trust. When this wave hit us, it did not find patience. It found antibodies. Our brains did not register peace, they registered foreign agent, invasion, threat. And we mounted a full-scale psychobiological defense. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine. We are flooding our own systems with the very poisons the chorus is trying to cure. On the main screen, the beautiful opalescent ships of the Silthani envoys hung in the void. They were still broadcasting, but their signal was changing. It was no longer a gentle, welcoming wave. It was becoming insistent, puzzled, and for the first time a note had entered the psychic choir that had not been heard in millennia. It was the precursor to frustration. It was the shadow of an emotion the chorus had been designed to erase. New energy signature was building from the lead Silthani ship. It was not a weapon, not a kinetic one anyway. It was a focused, concentrated beam of the peace signal. It is targeting us. Kenji's replacement at comms, a young ensign who was visibly trembling but still at her post, reported. It is increasing, the amplitude. It is aimed right at the bridge. Shields, Rostova roared. No effect, Captain, the ensign cried. It is passing right through the hull. It is. The wave that hit this time was a psychic tsunami. It was a physical weight, a crushing, suffocating calm. It demanded surrender. It was the voice of a god, and it said, sleep. Rostova felt her knees buckle. The adrenaline was failing. The sheer power of the signal was overwhelming her biology. The anger faded. The fear ebbed. Her eyelids grew heavy. It would be so easy to just let go. No, Aris gasped, slumping against the wall. It is too much. Then, from the engineering bay, Sub-Engineer Haska's voice, raw with terror and rage, screamed over the comm. Eat this, you comm bastards. Warp core surge on my mark, full frequency. Haska, no, Rostova tried to shout, but the word was a mumble. Now, Haska's voice screamed. The Sagan did not explode. Instead, it screamed. Haska, in a fit of desperate, paranoid, Deathworlder ingenuity, had done the one thing the placid, logical chorus could never have predicted. He did not just reroute power. He vented a microburst of raw, unstable warp field energy directly into the ship's communications array and broadcast it. If the chorus was a perfect, harmonious note, what the Sagan unleashed was a galaxy-spanning shriek of pure, unadulterated, static. It was the psychic embodiment of a panic attack. It was every human fear, every anxiety, every dark, paranoid thought, amplified by the warp core and fired like a bullet. On the bridge, the effect was instantaneous. The oppressive, warm blanket of the chorus was not just lifted, it was shredded. The crew was left gasping as if surfacing from a deep, dark ocean. The beautiful, harmonic music in their heads was replaced by a ringing silence, and the glorious, sharp, painful clarity of their own adrenaline-soaked minds. The effect on the Silthani envoys was catastrophic. On the bridge of the Silthani bioship, the voice of serenity, First Envoy Thali was in communion with the chorus. He, or the being that was a collective he, was bathing in the ecstasy of the harmony, gently directing the healing wave at the new broken species, the humans. Their psychic static was so painful, so jagged. Their resistance was a tragedy, the flailing of a sick child. He focused the beam, pouring on the love, the peace, the cure, knowing that in a moment, their suffering would end and they would join the communion. Then the Sagan responded. The Paranoia shield did not just defend. It reflected. Haska's warp core-fueled broadcast of pure weaponized human anxiety hit the Silthani fleet like an iron fist. For the first time in 10,000 years, First Envoy Thali felt something. It was not peace. It was not harmony. It was a jagged, piercing, unbearable sensation. It was the feeling of being watched. It was the sensation of teeth at his throat. It was the sudden, absolute, cold knowledge certainty that he was prey. He felt, for one horrific, agonizing second, what it was to be human. He felt fear. The psychic backlash was devastating. The Silthani, who had not possessed a fight-or-flight response for generations, had no defense. The emotion was a poison. Their beautiful, ovoid ships, which were extensions of their own consciousness, flinched. The voice of Serenity shuddered, its pearlescent hull flickering to a dull, sickly gray. On the Sagan's main screen, the 5 bioships recoiled as one. They did not just stop broadcasting, they fled, tearing open chaotic, uncontrolled warp field apertures and vanishing into the void in a blind panic. They left behind only the echo of a new, terrified thought, broadcast galaxy-wide on the Chorus's network. The message was simple. The cure is rejected. The patient is contagious. On the bridge of the Sagan, there was a full minute of stunned, ringing silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of the crew. What just happened? The ensign at comms whispered, her hand still shaking. Eris Thorne pushed himself off the wall, his expression a mixture of terror and exhilaration. I think we just gave the bogeyman nightmares. He staggered, over to a console, his fingers flying. I am reading the Silthani fleet's retreat signal. It is being echoed across the entire Chorus network. They are warning the galaxy about us. Warning them? Rostova said, her voice hoarse. She grabbed the comm. Haska, report. Are you alive? Alive, Captain. The voice came back, shaky but defiant. The core is unhappy, but stable. Did it work? It worked, Mr. Haska, Rostova breathed, a wild, trembling laugh threatening to escape her. You just saved the ship. Eris turned from his console, his face grim. He saved the ship, Captain, but he may have just damned our species. Look at this. He projected the message that was now propagating across the galaxy. It was not a declaration of war. It was worse. It was a quarantine notice, broadcast galaxy-wide. It designated species humanity as a Class 1 psychic pathogen. The nature of the pathogen was described as a resistance to harmony, composed of violent, chaotic emotions like fear, anger, and paranoia. The assessment was stark. The human soul was a disease, it was contagious, and it rejected the cure while amplifying the sickness. The directive was simple. All ascended species were to avoid Sector 28 Gamma. Humanity was to be contained. The plague must not spread. A cure, the message concluded, must be developed forcibly. Rostova read the words, and a cold dread replaced the heat of the adrenaline. They had not just made an enemy. They had been declared a disease. The space orcs were not just chaotic. Their very chaos was now seen as a weaponized plague. They are afraid of us, she whispered. Yes, Eris said, meeting her gaze. They are. For the first time, the ascended galaxy is afraid. They have discovered an emotion they thought they'd cured. And now they have a new unifying purpose. Not to heal us, but to eradicate us. Because we have shown them that their perfect, peaceful harmony can be broken. We have shown them that they, too, can be afraid. Rostova looked at her bridge crew. They were battered, terrified, and more alive than any being in this galaxy had been for 1,000 years. They were a crew of paranoid, anxious, aggressive, and utterly defiant Deathworlders. They were humanity. Ensign, Rostova ordered, her voice hardening, the command stress settling back onto her like a familiar, comforting cloak. Set a course. For Earth, maximum warp. Use every shortcut, every slingshot. Haska, I want that engine screaming. She looked at the empty void where the Silthani had been. The galaxy has just defined us as a plague. Let us show them just how infectious we can be. The Sagan tore a hole in the fabric of normal space, emerging at the absolute edge of the Sol system. The transit was brutal, a series of gut-wrenching high-risk warp jumps that pushed the ship's experimental drive to its breaking point. Sub-engineer, Haska had kept the engine screaming just as ordered, his paranoia-fueled genius bypassing safety limiters with a terrifying, necessary recklessness. The ship itself seemed to groan in protest, its hull plating resonating with the stress. Eva, Rostova had not slept. Neither had Eris Thorne. They, along with the rest of the bridge crew, were running on a cocktail of adrenaline hangover, recycled air caffeine, and the cold, sharp terror of their new reality. They looked less like a triumphant crew of first contact explorers and more like haggard survivors of a shipwreck. "Earthside Command, Captain," the ensign at comms reported, her voice strained. "High priority channel is open. They are not happy. We broke protocol by, quote, fleeing a first contact scenario and maintaining warp-level comm silence. Patch them through to the briefing room," Rostova said, rubbing her temples. The phantom pressure of the chorus was gone, but the headache it left behind was a dull, pounding ache. "Aris, Haska, you're with me. The rest of you lock down the bridge. Run diagnostics on every system. And I mean every system. If a light bulb is flickering, I want to know why." The briefing room was a small, sterile white compartment. The face that appeared on the main screen was that of Admiral Kenjiro Tanaka. He was a man with a face carved from granite, known for his unflappable calm and strategic patience. He was, also, Eva noted with a fresh spike of dread, the grandfather of the same Kenji Tanaka now lying in the Sagan's medbay, peacefully and utterly vacant. "Captain Rostova," the Admiral began, his voice dangerously level, "you have, in the last 48 hours, broken 12 separate contact protocols, ignored 37 direct hails from this command, and pushed an invaluable prototype vessel to 98% structural failure. I want an explanation, and it had better be the single greatest explanation I have ever heard." "Admiral," Eva said, stepping forward. Her uniform was creased, her hair was a mess, but her gaze was iron. "I am attaching my full report and the ship's sensor logs to this channel. But they won't tell you what you need to know. You need to hear it. We did not flee a first contact. We fled an assimilation." She laid it out. The beautiful ships, the peace wave, the psychic cure that was, in fact, an extinction-level predator. Eris Thorne stepped in, providing the xenopsychological analysis, his words tumbling out in a rapid, anxious, but brilliant stream. He explained the paranoia shield theory, the rejection of the gift, and the biological fear-based defense. Admiral Tanaka listened, his expression unchanging. He was a product of the Great Stillness era, a time when humanity, having solved its own internal conflicts, looked to the stars with a hopeful academic curiosity. He was a man who believed in diplomacy, in understanding. This report sounded like madness. "A psychic plague," the Admiral repeated, his voice flat. "A benevolent entity that cures species to death. Captain, this reads less like a contact report and more like a work of paranoid fiction." "Sir, with all due respect," Eris interjected, his voice rising. "Paranoid fiction is now our reality. They didn't see us as equals. They saw us as patients. They didn't want to talk, they wanted to operate. And when we refused the anesthetic, they tried to hold us down." "And our response?" the Admiral asked, his eyes narrowing. "The energy signature we detected from your ship, the one that tore a hole in subspace? Your report calls it an improvised psychic broadcast." Haska, who had been standing silently, his arms crossed, spoke for the first time. His voice was low, and it vibrated with a mechanic's certainty. "Admiral, they tried to get inside my engine room, psychically. They tried to make my engineers shut down the core. They calmed 3 of my crew into a stupor. I hit them back. I modulated the warp field's frequency and pushed it through the main comms array. I gave them a taste of what our sickness feels like. And, sir, they broke. They ran." The Admiral was silent. He looked past Eva, past Aris to some distant point. "And Officer Tanaka, my grandson?" Eva's stomach tightened. "He's in medbay, Admiral. He's placid. He's healthy. Vitals are perfect. But he's gone, sir. He took the full force of the initial harmony wave. He accepted the cure. Dr. Thorne and I, we were too anxious, too paranoid. Our minds were already shielded. Kenji, he was an optimist." The word hung in the air. Optimist. It sounded like a tragic, fatal flaw. The Admiral's stony expression finally cracked. A line of profound pain settled between his brows. "You are relieved of command, Captain. The Sagan is to be impounded for analysis. You, Dr. Thorne, and Sub-Engineer Haska will be placed in secure debriefing. This is now a matter for the full Security Council. The screen went dark. He didn't believe us. Haska growled. No, Eris said, wringing his hands. He didn't. Not really. He's a man of peace. He can't conceive of a predator that looks like a god. He will, Ava said, her voice a cold whisper. He will, because we didn't just run. We left a trail, and we brought the plague home. The secure debriefing was a comfortable windowless room in a high-security UN command bunker beneath Geneva. The coffee was good. The food was synthesized but nutritious, and the door was guarded by 2 stern-faced soldiers. It was a prison, cell with polite wallpaper. Eva, Eris, and Haska were kept together, a small, isolated island of the infected. For 3 days, they were questioned by panels of experts. Stern, skeptical sociologists, hard-nosed physicists who demanded Haska explain how he broadcast fear, and medical officers who reviewed the scans of the Sagan crew. The evidence was compelling, but it was also impossible. It broke every known model of galactic sociology. The turning point was Kenji Tanaka. He was moved to the bunker's advanced medical wing. Admiral Tanaka stood outside the observation glass, watching his grandson. Kenji was seated in a comfortable chair, staring at a wall. He was smiling. It was a gentle, beatific, and utterly empty smile. He ate when food was placed in his mouth. He slept when the lights were dimmed. He did not speak. He did not react. He did not initiate. He was a perfect, healthy, living corpse. A young neuropsychologist, Dr. Lena Hansen, was the first to give the phenomenon a name. We're calling it chorus contentment syndrome, she said, standing beside Admiral Tanaka and a now unshackled Eris Thorne. We've analyzed the brain scans from Officer Tanaka and the other calmed crew members. The chorus didn't add anything. It took something away. She brought up 2 scans. One was a healthy, active human brain, a riot of electrical color. This is Dr. Thorne during his debriefing, she said. Note the high activity in the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. This is a brain under stress, anxious, paranoid if you'll forgive the term, doctor. It is thinking, predicting, fearing. Forgiven, Eris muttered. She then pointed to the second scan. It was Kenji's. The brain's base functions were active. It was running the heart, the lungs, the autonomic systems. But the higher function areas, the human parts, were a sea of cool, quiet blue. This is Officer Tanaka, she said. The peace wave acted like a targeted psychic neuroleptic. It has severed or at least permanently suppressed the connections that create fear, ambition, anxiety, and aggression. He has no drive, no spark. He is, as the chorus intended, cured of the burden of self. Admiral Tanaka placed a hand on the glass. His reflection stared back at him, superimposed over his placid, smiling grandson. It's an execution, the Admiral whispered, his voice thick. They executed my boy and left his body to mock me. It's worse, Admiral, Eris said, his voice quiet. An execution is an act of anger. This was an act of medicine, of pity. They didn't hate us. They pitied us. They saw our entire species as a bundle of painful, chaotic impulses, and they decided to fix us. It was at that moment that a priority alert chimed. An aide rushed in, handing the Admiral a data slate. He read it, and the last of his peacetime, skepticism evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard focus of a commander at war. Dr. Hansen, the Admiral ordered, not looking up. What would happen if you showed Officer Tanaka a direct, immediate threat? A fire? A weapon? We tried, sir, Lena said. We triggered the fire alarm in his room. He smiled at the flashing light. We had a guard point a sidearm at him. He reached out to touch the barrel. He has no concept of threat. He is unwound. Then, we are a species of one, the Admiral said. He turned to Aris, Eva, and Haska, who had been brought in under guard. Haska's logs have been corroborated. The Sagan's broadcast, your psychic scream, was recorded by every sensor array from here to the Oort cloud. It was not just a scream, Dr. Thorne. It was a beacon. He activated the room's main display. It showed the Sol system. And at the far, deep black edge, where the system's gravity gave way to the interstellar void, new signals were appearing. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They're not Silthani, Eris breathed, staring at the plot. The energy signatures are different, broader. They are the chorus, the Admiral said. All of them. The Levisk, the Cathel, the Ascended races. The Sagan's broadcast did more than just send the envoys running. It was a note of pure discord in their perfect harmony. It was a pain signal that the entire collective heard. And like a body, the chorus is now sending all its antibodies to deal with the infection. They're coming here, Eva stated. It wasn't a question. Yes, the Admiral replied. We're picking up, for lack of a better term, chatter on the network. The chorus is panicked. Your scream, Mr. Haska, it hurt them. It introduced their first new negative emotion in 10,000 years. And now, they are not just coming to cure us. They are coming to sterilize us. The conclave of the chorus was not a place, but a state of being. It was 1 trillion minds, linked across the galaxy, sharing a single harmonious thought. But that harmony was now shattered. A note of pure, jagged pain had been struck. It was the echo of the Sagan's scream, a blast of raw, weaponized human paranoia. On the world of Cathel Prime, the former warriors who now spent their days in serene contemplation found themselves looking at shadows with a new, unfamiliar sensation. Their art, once focused on peaceful abstracts, now featured jarring, dark-angled shapes. They did not know why. They simply knew the harmony was ill. A new directive was formed, born not of a single mind, but from the collective, panicked consensus. The source of the pain, the human plague, was located. It was a single, muddy, chaotic world. The logic of the conclave was cold, simple, and medical. The infection is localized. A thought-form consensus from the Levisk Ascended was broadcast. The patient humanity has proven terminal. The sickness of their emotions is not just a danger to themselves. It is now a vector for psychic contagion. They have weaponized their own pain. The first treatment failed. A Silthani envoy mind added the thought still trembling with the memory of fear. The patient is not just sick. The patient is violent. The patient resists the cure. The patient is a threat to the health of the whole. The decision was therefore unanimous. It was not a declaration of war. War was a product of anger, of greed, of fear. Emotions the chorus had cured. This was a sanitization. It was a medical procedure on a galactic scale. A new fleet was assembled. It was not a fleet of envoys. This was the purification fleet. The ships were different. Where the envoy vessels were ovoid and biological, these were vast crystalline structures, humming with a focused, sterile power. They were not warships. They were, as Eris Thorne had feared, psychic scalpels. They were designed for a single purpose: to focus the entire power of the chorus, 1 trillion cured minds, into a single, overwhelming beam of peace. This beam would not be an offer. It would be a command. It was designed to overwhelm an entire planet's worth of paranoia shields. It would not offer the cure. It would impose it. It would wash over the planet, and every human mind would be calmed, just as Kenji Tanaka had been. In a single, silent, peaceful wave, humanity would be rendered inert. The sickness would be contained. The pain in the harmony would cease. The fleet, thousands strong, composed of every ascended species in the sector, began its journey. They moved with the slow, implacable, and righteous certainty of a surgeon about to excise a tumor. They had no anger. They had no hate. They had only the profound, loving, and absolute conviction that humanity, for the good of the galaxy, must be stopped. Back in the Geneva bunker, the mood had shifted from disbelief to a cold, frantic terror. The enemy was coming. They were not coming with bombs or lasers. They were coming with a psychic wave of total annihilation. How do we fight it? Admiral Tanaka demanded, his command room now the de facto center of Earth's planetary defense. Shields won't work. Our ships are useless. How do we fight a feeling? All eyes turned to Eris Thorn. He was no longer a prisoner. He was the single, most important asset on the planet. He was pacing, his mind a whirlwind. We can't, Eris said, stopping suddenly. We can't fight it, not in the conventional sense. The Sagan survived because it was one ship. Haska's broadcast was a focused, desperate, lucky shot. A needle of panic in a sea of calm. But what's coming? That's the whole ocean. It will drown us. We can't block it. Then what? Eva Rostova said, her hands clenched. We just let them? We let them turn us into that? She nodded toward the medical bay. No, Eris said, a wild, dangerous light in his eyes. We can't block it, so we have to infect it. Haska was the key. He didn't just broadcast fear. He broadcast his fear. He broadcast humanity, our entire chaotic, beautiful, messy operating system. That's what hurt them. That's the plague. He turned to the Admiral. Sir, they think we're a disease. They're right. Our emotions are a psychic pathogen to a sterile, cured mind. So, we stop trying to build a shield, and we start building a weapon. We don't block the chorus. We give them what they want. We give them all of us. I don't understand, Doctor, Tanaka said. They're broadcasting a single pure note of peace, Eris explained, his words picking up speed. We can't shout over it, but we can infect their signal. We need to build a paranoia shield for the planet. Not to block, but to broadcast. We need to take our collective, us, our anxiety, our rage, our fear of the dark, our defiance, our sheer bloody-minded space orc stubbornness, and we need to piggyback it onto their own psychic network. When they try to cure us, we give them the full, unfiltered, uncured human experience. We make them feel everything. You're talking about weaponizing psychology on a planetary scale, Dr. Hansen said, her face pale. Exactly, Eris almost shouted. We don't need warships. We need amplifiers. Mr. Haska, could you do what you did to the Sagan's engine, but on a global scale? Using our entire planetary communications grid? Our defense satellites? Haska's eyes lit up. The mechanic's mind saw the problem. You want to turn the planet into a broadcast antenna. You want to vent our planetary power grid through the incoming chorus signal? To modulate their peace wave with our noise? He broke into a terrifying, gap-toothed grin. Doctor, it would be the ugliest piece of engineering in human history. It's a terrible idea. It'll probably tear the grid apart. But can you do it? Eva asked. Oh yes, Haska said. I can definitely do it. Good, Admiral Tanaka said, his face set. He looked at the tactical display. The first, fastest ships of the purification fleet were now only days away. They were entering the Oort cloud. This is our new war, the Admiral declared, his voice ringing with a new cold purpose. Project Paranoia Shield is active. We are not a species in need of a cure. We are the species that reminds the galaxy why it needs to be afraid. Get to work. The purification fleet arrived without sound, without violence. It was a silent, lethal dawn. Thousands of crystalline vessels emerged from warp space, arranging themselves in a perfect, mathematically terrifying lattice around Earth and its moon. They were beautiful, catching the light of the sun and refracting it into blinding sterile rainbows. They did not hail. They did not posture. They were a surgeon's instruments, laid out and ready for the procedure. On Earth, the skies were clear. The fleets were invisible to the naked eye, but their presence was a crushing weight. Every psychic sensitive on the planet was on their knees weeping. Every animal at every zoo was howling, cowering, or attempting to flee. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath. In the Geneva command bunker, the atmosphere was thick enough to cut. They're in position, Admiral Tanaka said, his voice a low rumble in the tomb-like silence. They are charging. We're detecting a unified planetary-scale energy field. It's not like anything we've ever seen. It's coherent. It's the chorus, Eris Thorne said. He was strapped into a chair that looked like a cross between a pilot's seat and a medical scanner. Wires snaked from a helmet on his head to a massive, ad hoc console. They're combining their minds. A trillion voices all about to sing the same single note. They're going to hit us with everything. Let 'em? Haska's voice crackled over the comm. He was not in the bunker. He was at the heart, a new facility built in a frantic, sleepless week inside a decommissioned particle collider in Switzerland. He was standing on a metal gantry above a spinning, howling gyroscope that was the central hub for the entire planet's power grid. Project Paranoia shield is green. All global networks are linked. We've diverted 90% of Earth's power to this thing. We're ready to modulate their signal. We're ready to be the static. Dr. Thorne, Admiral Tanaka asked, "Is this sane?" Eris looked up, his eyes bloodshot, but fiercely alive. "Sir, sanity is what they're trying to cure us of. We are about to give them a full, unanesthetized dose of human consciousness. It's the most insane, and therefore most human thing we could possibly do. It's time." Eva Rostova stood at the Admiral's side, her hand on her sidearm. It was a useless, symbolic gesture, but it grounded her. "Admiral," she said, "the fleet is glowing. The energy spike is imminent." "Haska, Aris, on my mark," Tanaka said. He looked at the tactical display, at the thousands of lights that represented the enemy. Humanity is a chaotic, paranoid, aggressive species. We are the space orcs of the galaxy. He allowed himself a grim, fleeting smile. "Let's give them a proper introduction. Mark." The first wave of the purification hit. It was not a beam. It was an arrival. It was a psychic weight that pressed down on all 8 billion human souls simultaneously. It was the feeling of being submerged in a warm, deep, and suffocating ocean of peace. It was a trillion voices whispering in unison in the back of every human mind. "It is all right. The struggle is over. Your pain is unnecessary. You are sick. Let us heal you. You do not need to be afraid. You do not need to be angry. You do not need to be across the planet. The panic, the fear, the frantic preparations." They faltered. In cities, people who had been running for cover slowed to a walk, a look of confused, placid wonder on their faces. Soldiers in their bunkers felt their hands relax on their weapons. The terror of the command bunker was replaced by a sudden, blissful quiet. "It's so peaceful," the comm's ensign whispered, a tear rolling down her cheek. We don't have to fight." "Now," Eris Thorne screamed, the word both verbal and a psychic jolt of his own defiance amplified by his console. "Haska, now hit it! Engaging the noise," Haska roared. In the collider, he slammed his fist down on a single industrial red button. The planetary grid surged. The entirety of Earth's energy, coal, nuclear, solar, hydro, all of it, was funneled into the Paranoia shield array. Haska's ugly engineering did not just modulate the chorus's signal. It hijacked it. It was a psychic parasite, a jolt of raw, unrefined power that latched onto the peace wave and used it as a carrier. The chorus, a trillion minds strong, had just opened the door to a small, muddy, unassuming house. And the entirety of the human experience in all its screaming, violent, joyful, and terrifying glory charged out to greet them. The chorus had come to deliver a single, pure note. What they got in return was a symphony of madness. When Haska's machine engaged, the effect was instantaneous and absolute. The peace wave, now a carrier for the human plague, was reflected, back amplified 1,000-fold and broadcast into the chorus network. For the first time in millennia, First Envoy Thully, safe on his bridge miles from the sickness, felt the fear again. But it was not just his own. It was the fear of 8 billion other minds. He was suddenly, agonizingly alone in the dark, and the shadows had teeth. He felt the primal reptilian terror of being hunted, but it was not just fear. A Cathel warrior ascendant, placidly monitoring the wave from his crystalline vessel, was suddenly struck by a sensation he had not felt since before his cure. It was a hot, scalding, glorious feeling. It was the injustice of a bully on a playground, the fury of a driver cut off in traffic, the cold, hard rage of a soldier seeing a fallen comrade. His four-handed fists clenched, his mandibles clicked, and a low ancestral growl rumbled in his chest. He felt, for the first time in a generation, the burning desire to hit something. He was feeling anger. A Levisk musician, her mind part of the great harmony, was inundated with a feeling so powerful it knocked her from her meditative state. It was not the serene contentment of her species. It was a sharp, painful, beautiful ache. It was the soundtrack to Titanic. It was the feeling of a first love, the desperate, irrational grief of a breakup, the longing for a home that never was, the fierce, possessive, animal love for a child. The Levisk, who had forgotten how to reproduce, was suddenly, overwhelmingly, filled with a longing so profound it was a physical pain. She wanted, without knowing what or why. The entire chorus, a trillion minds linked as one, was struck by the full, unfiltered, chaotic, and contradictory spectrum of human emotion. They felt the selfish greed of a stockbroker. They felt the selfless sacrifice of a firefighter. They felt the crushing despair of a great artist's failure. They felt the idiotic, explosive joy of a winning sports team. They felt the petty spite of a spurned lover. They felt the profound, illogical hope of a gambler. They felt anxiety about a test. They felt paranoia that their neighbors were talking about them. They felt ambition for a promotion. They felt jealousy. They felt love. They felt hate. They felt hunger. The chorus was a sterile, clean system. Humanity was a bucket of psychic sewerage, and it had just been dumped directly into the water supply. The pure single note of peace was shattered into a billion discordant screaming, laughing, weeping, and desires-driven notes. In the Geneva bunker, the oppressive peace was gone, ripped away like a blanket. The bridge crew was gasping, their minds their own again. Eris Thorne was rigid in his chair, his eyes wide, a trickle of blood running from his nose. It's working, he gasped, his voice full of a terrible awe. They're not just hearing us, they're feeling us. We are infecting them. On the main tactical display, the perfect, beautiful, crystalline lattice of the purification fleet was wavering. The ships were no longer holding position. They were drifting. A few were firing weapons, not at Earth, but at each other, their newly rediscovered rage and fear given sudden, violent expression. Other ships were simply fleeing, just as the first envoys had, tearing open random warp holes in a blind panic. The surgeon's tools had been given to a madman. No, worse. The tools themselves had gone mad. The conclave of the chorus was no more. It was now the bedlam. The psychic network that had unified a galaxy in sterile contentment was now a superconductor for chaos. The Levisk, overwhelmed by the return of longing, grief, and passion, began composing again. Their first new symphonies in 1,000 years were not placid drones. They were horrific, beautiful, screaming works of art that broadcast their newfound despair and joy, further muddying the psychic waters. Their ships, which were extensions of their art, began to change, their crystalline structures warping into baroque, emotional, and inefficient shapes. The Cathel were, in a word, furious. Their ancestral warrior nature, so long suppressed, had come roaring back. But they were angry at everything. They were angry at the chorus for curing them. They were angry at humanity for breaking them. They were angry at their own ships for being too peaceful. Cathel vessels turned on each other, not in a tactical, strategic war, but in a series of confused, rage-fueled brawls. The galaxy's great stillness was broken by the sound of ancient warrior races remembering what a blood feud was. The Silthani, the original envoys, were the most tragically affected. Their primary role had been healing. Now their entire identity was broken. They were the ones who had been afraid first, and now they were afraid of everything. They were afraid of the newly enraged Cathel. They were afraid of the newly depressed Levisk. And they were, with a religious superstitious terror, hysterically afraid of the plague source Earth. Their fleet did not just retreat, it disintegrated. Ships fled in all directions, their crews' minds shattered by the sheer, unfiltered volume of the human condition. The purification wave had not just failed, it had reversed. The disease had consumed the cure. On Earth, the effect was profound. The psychic pressure vanished, leaving behind a global collective headache and the strange shared memory of having lived 1,000 other lives in the span of a few minutes. In the Geneva bunker, Eris Thorn was unstrapped from his chair. He was shaking, not from fear, but from the exertion. "They're gone," he whispered, staring at the tactical display. The sensor web was a mass of confused, chaotic signals, all fleeing the Sol system at maximum warp. They're not a chorus anymore. They're just a crowd, a panicked, screaming, emotional crowd. Eva Rostova looked at the screen, her face pale. What did we do, Aris?" "We introduced the variable," Aris said, rubbing his raw temples. "They built a galaxy of perfect, sterile logic, a system with no predators and no prey. They cured the illness of survival. We just proved that the illness is the survival. We reminded them that you cannot have peace without war. You can't have joy without despair. You can't have life without fear." Haska's voice came over. The calm, shaky but triumphant. "Grid is stable. Well, stable is a strong word. We blew out the power in most of South America. But the antenna worked. So, are we done?" Admiral Tanaka, who had been silent for the entire encounter, stepped forward. He looked at the tactical plot, at the retreating, chaotic, broken signals of 1,000 ascended civilizations. "No, Mr. Haska," Admiral Tanaka said, his voice heavy. "We are not done. We have just, God help us, begun." The aftermath was not quiet. The galaxy was now loud. The chorus network, once a single monotonous hum, was now a cacophony. It was a billion trillion voices, all newly uncured, all experiencing the raw, unfiltered, and terrifying spectrum of emotion for the first time in millennia. The ascended races were, in effect, going through a collective and very painful puberty. The Cathel had declared war on the Silthani for the crime of forced curing. The Levisk had split into a dozen new, passionate, and violently opposed artistic movements and were composing dirges about their long-lost children. The Silthani themselves had become galactic hermits, walling off their systems, their newfound fear having blossomed into a civilization-defining paranoia that made Eris Thorn look like a well-adjusted optimist, and humanity? Humanity was the source. In the Geneva bunker, now the permanent nerve center of planetary defense, the new reality was setting in. "They're calling us the Plague," Eva Rostova said, reading from a decoded transmission picked up from a Cathel broadcast. "Or the Shout, or the Orkheart. They blame us, but they're also asking for help." Eris Thorn, now head of the new Xenopsychology Warfare Division, nodded. "Of course they are. We just gave an entire galaxy a nervous breakdown. We're the only species that has any experience with these emotions. We're the only ones who know how to cope. We're not just space orcs anymore, Captain. We're the galaxy's unwilling and deeply resented therapists." Admiral Tanaka stood by the main display, which now showed the Sol system, but with a new bright red quarantine perimeter around it, one they had put up. A shield to keep the newly maddened galaxy out. "We called it the Paranoia shield," the Admiral said, his voice quiet. "We thought it was our defense, a shield for us. We were wrong." "Sir?" Eva asked. He turned to his crew, to Rostova, his new field commander, to Thorn, his unwilling prophet, to the memory of Haska, his mad engineer. "It was never our shield. It is us. Our paranoia, our anxiety, our rage. That is the shield." The flaw in our design is the one thing that kept us alive, and the one thing that has now broken a galaxy. The chorus was right about one thing. He pointed to the chaotic warring signals outside their system. We are a disease. We are the humanity plague. But we're the only ones who have the antibodies. We're the only ones who know how to live with the sickness of being alive. He looked at Eva. Your mission is no longer exploration, Captain. It's damage control. The galaxy is now full of emotionally unstable children with the power of gods, and we are the only adults in the room. Eva Rostova straightened her uniform. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by the heavy, cold weight of responsibility. And Kenji Tanaka, sir? She asked softly. He is unchanged, the Admiral said, the pain back in his eyes for a moment. He is the only cured human, a monument to the peace that we in our paranoia just destroyed. He will be a reminder of what we fought and of what we lost. Eva nodded. Understood, Admiral. She walked to the command console, her gaze hard. The Sagan, repaired and refitted, was waiting. The galaxy was waiting. It was a new, terrifying, and chaotic cosmos, and humanity, the space orc plague, was the only thing holding it together. Their paranoia shield was no longer a personal defense. It was the only thing protecting the universe from itself.